This is Grant from State of the Spark, and I am super excited for today's show. I'm going to give you a preview of what was going on through my mind and how I overcame the time that I had to face down sleeping in my car, and how teachings from a samurai helped me do just that. We're going to talk about facing the changes that ChatGPT is bringing. We're going to share with you what is the most positive state in the Union of the United States. We're going to share with what's the most positive state, what's the most negative state. But before any of that, you know what we're going to do. Morning cup of gratitude. What are you grateful for this morning? I want to hear in the comments below. I want to hear what's driving you. I want to hear what's keeping you pumped. Let me know what's making you most grateful today for being awesome, for being awake, for facing the world. Let's talk about morning cup of gratitude. And you know I'm going to start. I am super grateful for a restful weekend. I'm super grateful for we knocked out a landscaping project, mostly on Saturday. I am super grateful for my two collaborators, Austin Rickley Crindle, otherwise known as Aussie, and Jarrett Carpenter, otherwise known as Jarrett Carpenter. And we're working on several projects together. The main one being a project app that we're working on. That's a social media follow app. It's really cool. We're working on that. And we made progress, measurable progress. These are people who I've never met in person. I won't always be able to say that. But we've never met in person, and we moved this thing forward. One of them came up with a slide deck for fundraising. Another one came up with a term sheet. Another one's working on a clickable demo. We're actually working through this project and building in a down market. I am grateful for that. I am super grateful for my partners, and those are just a few of my partners. Adam Welchel continues to impress me and drive me forward and motivate me with all the changes he's doing in his own company, Spark Billing. So I'm super impressed with that. So I'm grateful for a lot today. What are you grateful for? Tell me in the comments below. If you can't start this day with gratitude, are you even alive? And you can find something that you're relatively grateful for. You might not have the best job. You might be down and out right now on a lot of things. But if you can find something to be grateful for, you can find an opening into your best self as you face down the world today. And that's what we're talking about, facing down the world today. Now, remember just to like or subscribe. If you know someone who needs some encouragement today, like or subscribe, tag them in the comments below, because we're going to be talking about how to face down the challenges that the market is causing, that ChatGPT is causing, whether it's in your small business, whether it's in your relationships or your jobs. Tag somebody who wants to hear about it, and make sure you always check out our goal-setting book, IgniteYourDreams.today. Let's talk about other news. I want to make sure that we share other news with you, news that lifts you up, that changes your perspective, that's not the same old headlines that they want you paying attention to. You and I both know that there are a lot of headlines that they want you consuming and freaking out. For example, is the market imploding? Well, no, of course not. But if you read the headlines, you would think that the market is imploding. But as I'm about to show you, we're actually in a little bit of an up market on the Dow, the NASDAQ, and the S&P 500. We'll look at that in a quick second. But what's important? And I heard Alex Hormozy say this weekend, if something seems like it's insurmountable, zoom out and view it from the global view, and then zoom out and view it from the solar view. If you can't see it from space, is it really that important? Remember, this is the game of life, and so much is set before us that isn't that important, but I know it feels important. But our piece of other news today, our pieces of other news are made to change your perspective a little bit and maybe tone down how important we really think it is to return to the fact that, remember, living is a game. This is the game of life. It's the game of business. These are a game. And if you lose sight of the fact that they're a game, you're going to take it too seriously and probably miss the real purpose of all of it. Let's talk about the conjunction. I mentioned a few weeks ago that we were going to have a massive conjunction, and guess what? That's today. If you want to view a conjunction, and what is a conjunction? It's when you look up to the sky and see several planets. Now, we're so close to having this species make a trip to Mars, it's not even funny. We're so close to being an interplanetary species, it's not funny. And when you look to space, you can imagine yourself taking a vacation on Mars, or taking an adventure maybe not so much of a vacation. But Mars, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, and the moon should all be visible late tonight after 8 p.m. on the western horizon. Now, you're going to want to make sure you have a clear view. You're going to want to make sure there's no trees obstructing or a moon obstructing, because two of the planets will be low on the horizon, just 4 degrees above the horizon in the western sky. So you can see that tonight. Remember, I want to share this with you because of this. You might be sucked into social media. You might be sucked into the headline. You might be sucked into Twitter. I know I am. I'm about that life. But I want you to know that these aren't your identity. These don't dictate your future. These headlines and what's going on in the world is just a small bit of this life. Make sure you're taking in the rest of life. I've dropped a link there in the comments for you so that you can always look into how to actually view the 5 planets. And I encourage you, take a moment, view the western sky about 8 p.m. around this time zone. It should be just after sunset. And meditate on how small we are, how big the universe is, and how important other things are. Should we avail ourselves to the goals in front of us? Absolutely. Should we give our best to the things in front of us? 100%. We should absolutely play that game. But we should make sure that when we're not playing the game, we're sitting on the sidelines and enjoying the fun. So there you go. You got the link right there in the comments below. Check that out. Let's talk about the markets aren't so scary as you think. So the Dow Jones today is at 32,500 in pre-market action. Now, about 5 weeks ago, it was at 33,800, and then we had the Silicon Valley banking crisis, and all the banks are collapsing, and that is still kind of imminent. But still, the Dow Jones is at 32,500. You would think that if we were in a recession, or if the world was falling or the sky was falling, you'd think it'd be a lot lower than 32,500, but it's not. The S&P 500 is at 4,016. The last time reported, it was at 3,900. It's about flat from the last time we reported this. The NASDAQ is at 12,900. The last time we reported is 11,100. That means the market is roughly, if not flat, it's actually up a little bit based on what's been going on the last few weeks. So a lot of the headlines are really causing a stir. We know gas prices are high. How should we feel a certain way about that? We know that food prices are high, we're told. And how should we feel about that? And we know that it's tough to get by, and we're told how we should feel about that. But all in all, the markets are flat, if not high. Now, that's not the only indicator. There's a lot of other indicators out there, but I'm just here to tell you that maybe this guy's not falling. Maybe we are looking at an adjustment, but just I present for your consideration, not financial advice, but my own, that, you know what, it's never as extreme as people want you to think it is. It's probably true, but it's not as extreme. Let's quickly talk about DeFi. Bitcoin's at 27,900. The last time reported 5 weeks ago was at 17,200. Last week it was at 28,000. It's kind of leveling off in that 27,000 to 28,000 mark. Could it pull back? I think it's going to pull back a little bit, but I think we're stabilizing in this area. Ethereum's at 1,700. Last week we reported it's 1,600, so it's up a little bit. It was up over 1,300 that we reported 5 weeks ago. Cardano, otherwise known as ADA, is at 35 cents. It's at about even. 5 weeks ago it was at 32 cents, so it's slowly creeping into the zone. ADA and Cardano is just like steady Eddie. And XRP Ripple's at 46, almost 47 cents. Last time I reported it's at 38 cents, so this is making a little bit of a move. 5 weeks ago when we reported it was at 35 cents. So yes, the stock market crashed. A lot of this capital drove into the cryptocurrency markets, and people are realizing, you know, why don't we leave our money into crypto for a little while we watch the dust settle on what's going on with the banking crisis. Now, I share the markets with you not to have you feel any sort of way except neutral. I'm trying to desensitize you to how the market should make you feel. You should actually look at the numbers and go, okay, well, the headlines say all these freaky things, but I actually looked at the numbers and, you know, the markets are fairly steady right now. So I'm not going to do anything dramatic. You don't need to do anything dramatic right now, not just yet. Keep your eye on what's going on. And today, fun fact, Silicon Valley Bank is opening again under its new ownership and all of its branches. So, like, are we through the banking thing? No. If they raise rates again and raise rates again and raise rates again, something might happen. And if they don't shorten the money supply, they keep the back door open with all the money supply increasing. So they're increasing rates to decrease money supply, but they're increasing money supply on the back end. Who knows what's going on, but how should you feel? Well, today we're going to talk about how you should feel in complete control, because you control your earning capacity, you control how you face these things down. But in this moment, I want you to realize that the TradFi markets are about up a little bit. And the DeFi markets are up a little bit. No, I'm not saying we're in a bull run. And no, I'm not giving you financial advice. I'm giving you emotional advice. It's okay. Calm down, make level-headed views, and don't do anything dramatic. Let's talk about the most positive states in America. I'm going to give you 3 seconds, 5. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to sip my coffee and you guess what are the top 3 most positive states in terms of their sentiment, in terms of their communication, in terms of what they're doing. Tell me what the top 3 most positive states are. I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Boom. If you guessed Arkansas, you would be correct. Arkansas, surprisingly, is one of the most positive states in America based on social media sentiment. There is an index known as the Social Sentiment Index, which pulls from real-time tweets and posts and actually uses AI to deduct what the words are, what the syntax is, and what the sentiment is of all the posts, and it aggregates them. And it puts them in order of most positive to most negative, or said a better way, most positive to least positive, because even the least positive states or negative states have a positive index. They're just the lowest on the totem pole. So let's look at this. The top 3 are this: Arkansas, South Dakota, and Alaska. The 3 most positively sentiment, meaning they're posting positive things, they're saying positive things, they're saying encouraging things, and I'll give you the link to this in just a quick second. Now, the least positive states, can you guess? I'm going to give you 3 seconds to guess the least positive states. If you guessed Louisiana, you would be correct. Louisiana, New Mexico, and the District of Columbia. I know it's not technically a state, but it's in the union. They might as well include Guam. These are the 3 least positive states in the union. That means their tweets, their Facebook posts, their Instagram posts, they all have a negative bias, or they use words like no, not, can't stand. And the AI has basically aggregated that their sentiment is largely negative. Now, does this mean that they're mean people? No, probably. Does this mean that they're hopeless? No, not necessarily. It's just an index of many indexes. Let me give you the link. This is the U.S. Social Sentiment Index. And you can check this link out yourself. You can see the resources there. It's there in the comments. And check it out. Florida, where I'm from, is actually on the negative side. It's got a -1 against the U.S. average, ranking about an 89, which is even with Connecticut and Georgia and Michigan. Doesn't matter if it's a blue state or a red state. It just has a certain sentiment, which is quite interesting. And Oregon, New Hampshire, Nebraska, North Dakota, other positive states. Check out the U.S. Twitter Social Sentiment Index there in the feed so that you can guesstimate and say, hey, my state's pretty positive or pretty negative, relatively speaking. Let's talk about the one word you can use in your relationship to fix everything. I'm just kidding. There is no one word. However, there was a study, and I'll have to get this link for you, that basically did a research into relationships. And relationships basically fall victim to what they call the fundamental attribution error. And it is this: when someone has a negative thing that they do, and you don't like it in that relationship, and you reflect on it and you get critical about it, often we do the fundamental attribution error, meaning if we've been around this person for any length of time, if we're used to them, we don't do this with strangers as much, or we do it with strangers in a different way. But in our intimate relationships, we start to just attribute things to their personality. That's just who they are. That's their personality. They always leave the toilet seat up. They always forget to tell me what they're doing on their schedule. They always make decisions without me, or whatever your accusation might be. Now, we do this with strangers quite quickly, but it falls so far into the judgmental zone that we make snap judgments. It's not necessarily the fundamental attribution error in the same way. It is in a different way, but that's nuanced. In our intimate relationships, however, over time, we start with a lot of grace, but over time, we lessen our grace and we start to just attribute their negative, or not even negative, their traits that are detrimental to you, which you think are negative, as a character flaw. And this is a major error. It quite frequently is not. And there's one word you can begin to use to not only take the edge off your criticism, but also grab you and tell you, hey, listen, you're being a little critical. And it's inserting this one word before your critique, and it is this. It's using the word oops. Now, as silly as that is, instead of criticizing someone saying, hey, you left the toilet seat up or you left the back door open, you could say, oops, you left the back door open. You can hear the difference on how it takes a little bit of the edge off the critique, but also reminds you to go, this was a mistake, not a character flaw. Oops, you left your water out. Oops, you left the TV on. Oops, you left the dog stuff out. Whatever it is that you think is a character flaw, you need to back off of that, not attribute it to a personality as much, because the more you attribute it to personality, guess what? You're probably triggering the same into them, and you're creating a schism in your relationship. But if you use the word oops, you can take the edge off a little bit and actually probably recover a bit of that relationship as you attribute it to mistakes and good intentions instead of a character flaw. Just a quick hot tip for relationships. Now let's quickly talk about how a samurai would face the economy, the change of what's going on with ChatGPT, the markets, and how I faced having to sleep in my car. Now listen, I know a lot of you are looking at the market and you're freaked out. A lot of you are looking at having to find new jobs or maybe being laid off. A lot of you are driving to the gas station and cringing because of how much gas is going to be. A lot of you are reading the headlines and wondering what the future of chaos looks like for you. I remember in 2008, I had walked away from a job that was paying me to read books, and I was suddenly out of income. I was no longer being paid to read books. I was no longer being paid in any capacity. Now, I had been an entrepreneur for years, and I had let those entrepreneur ventures go, and I had let myself get into an employment situation. And it was a fun employment situation, but I did not read the writing on the wall well enough, and I did not prepare. And when I suddenly found myself without an apartment, without income, and without any options except the cash in my pocket, literally no cash in the bank, I suddenly realized in a very short period of time, I came upon an evening when I realized I would have to sleep in my car, yes, as a homeless person. I was homeless for the first time in my adulthood that I could recall, without a place to go, without any friends, without anyone to call, without any money to buy a hotel that night, without any leads to rent an apartment. I suddenly found myself facing the need to rent a car. Now, this is true for a lot of people around the world. A lot of people are productive and homeless. They work jobs, but they don't have a place to go. They can't afford it, or they're in transition. Or they're in a developing country and have no place to stay, and all they have is their vehicle. And I was facing this and the stock market crisis of 2008. Not only was I avoiding even looking at my car, I sat in a coffee shop, an actual bagel shop, and I sat there as long as I could because I did not want to face the fact that I had let myself get into this plight. I didn't want to face the fact that I had actually failed. And I couldn't even think about this place where I had to sleep, where tomorrow, and I had such a heavy level of dread, where the next day I would have to suck up my ego and do what other people do, and that is go find a job. And this was traumatic for me at the time. It was traumatic for me for several reasons. Number one, there was no end in sight. I might have to sleep in my car indefinitely. Number two, I would wake up and I knew that there were many people competing for jobs that day. I knew that there were many people competing for day labor at 4 a.m. trying to get day labor work. I knew that there were many people in the Social Security line trying to get their Social Security check, and I had none of that. I had no safety net. I was listening to the headlines in the news, which were telling us that Lehman Brothers were collapsing, that the market was absolutely falling out of bed. I had no safety net, no future, full of dread, and I was avoiding facing the thing I was afraid of most, that I had no option but to do the next day or fail entirely. Fail entirely. And by failing entirely, I don't mean licking my wounds and going back home. There was no home. By failing entirely, I meant being on the street. I was facing this in 2007, 2008. And as I sat there full of dread, I thought I was going to throw up. I couldn't eat dinner. I had just a little bit of money, and I didn't want to spend that last money because I did need to take a shower in the morning. I did need to find a way to put myself together and go to job interviews. And I had nothing to my name, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't run out of gas. Heaviness and dread of this weighed down on me extremely. And I thought about this, and when I realized there was no way out, I thought about when I was a kid, when I was afraid of getting spanked. And when you're a kid and you're afraid of getting spanked, You tend to run away, you tend to hide. And I developed a strategy that I would run up to my dad and ask him to spank me now because the weight was worse. I realized as a kid that I developed a tendency to want to face the pain and face it head on. Now, let me take a time out here. I know a lot of you who will watch this throughout the day have small businesses. I know you have jobs that you're insecure about, or you have a small business that you've been kind of carrying along with bandage tape and duct tape and trying to make sure that your business will hold itself together. And you've barely made it through the pandemic, and now you're facing this economy, or at least the fear of this economy. I believe fear is going to drive this economy down more than economic indicators actually will. I believe the fear of the price of tank will actually drive prices down. I believe the fear of a recession will cause the recession right now more than the actual thing. Fear is prevalent today, and you might be experiencing fear in your small business. And I empathize. As you've heard, I've had exceptional fear. But I realized that I had to face this down. I was either going to toss and turn all night in my car and have a miserable night's sleep in my car if I was going to avoid it, or I could face it head on and own it as if it were part of my story that I was going to overcome. And I stood up tall in that coffee shop and looked outside and made eye contact with my vehicle and committed that this was not going to be a woe is me story. This was not going to be a part of my story that I was going to be ashamed or embarrassed of. This was a part of my story that I would own with my head high because I was going to leverage it as part of my story, as my hero's journey of Turning Point, that I was going to do this thing that I was absolutely petrified of, do it boldly, own it. I went to my car, I found a place to park, and I got comfortable, and I had a great night's sleep, and I changed my entire paradigm that I'm going to sleep in my car, I'm going to have a phenomenal night's sleep because I am here, and this is mine, and I'm going to take agency and take ownership over this. I slept like a baby, and I began to turn my life around the next day. My encouragement for you today is this: if you have your head in the sand, which is a euphemism or a metaphor for what ostriches do when things are freaky, they put their head in the sand. If you have put your head in the sand in your small business or in your job about needing to change, about facing ChatGPT, I know a lot of you small businesses have done the same old thing, the same old way in your marketing and your production and your bookkeeping and in your sales for the last 7 years. And ChatGPT has changed this, and the market is changing this. Everything is changing rapidly. Let me tell you a quick story. I was recently asked to speak at the American Advertising Federation, which I will do, on ChatGPT. I'm not necessarily an authority on ChatGPT, but I do have a brand and a reputation about staying up to date on cutting edge technology because of our web design company and because of the shows we do where we touch on technology like Not Crypto Bros, Friday Finances. We always stay on the cutting edge technology because the cutting edge technology is where freedom is. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. A lot of you people think escape is freedom, and that's a type of freedom. But if you can pay attention, you don't have to jump, you don't have to know how to use ChatGPT, but you have to be aware of its impact. So I was asked to speak at the American Advertising Federation, and I went through this deliberation of whether or not I should actually take the gig. I deliberated because of this. From the time they asked me to talk about it to the time I would show up and talk about it, ChatGPT would have iterated. We'll probably be at ChatGPT 4.5 or 5 by then. ChatGPT 3 was only released 3 or 4 months ago. ChatGPT 4 was less than a month ago. And in just a few weeks, when I speak at the American Advertising Federation about ChatGPT, it would have changed. And mind you, other tools have come out. Google Bard is almost as good. And then derivative products like advertising.ai or any of the tools that are spinning off from ChatGPT that are generating massive amounts of content, it will have all changed. And so I was tempted to not go because the message for advertisers and a lot of small business people and a lot of web designers is this: if you don't change and adapt, you will die. That's not a bad thing. That's the human condition. If we do not adapt, we will die. If we do not change, we will die. If you do not change your small business, it will be gone. And by change, I don't mean a dramatic change necessarily. Some of you do need a dramatic change. But many of you need to accept that you have to change in many small ways more than any big ways. You have to change in many small ways of how you do your invoicing, how you generate your advertising, how much advertising you push out there. Is your advertising ad-based or is it face-based? I recommend face-based. What is going on with IRL events? It's evolving, and it's evolving quickly. And are you experimenting and iterating quickly enough? My message to the American Advertising Federation when I speak there will be, you need to change. I don't care if you were cutting edge yesterday. You need to define yourself as change and adopt change. Do you have to adopt ChatGPT? Not necessarily. Maybe you go the opposite route. Maybe you detech, because what will become very valuable in this very near future that's coming upon us is IRL, in real life events. Maybe you do retreats. Maybe you change your entire model to do something else, but you have to change. You cannot stay where you're at. I just said to a friend recently, those who think they live in the future actually live in the present. And those who think they live in the present actually live in the past. The reason those who are trying to live in the future are trying to live in the future because they're afraid of living in the past. They're afraid that the past will suck them down and they will wake up one day unbeknownst to them. Now, you can conscientiously opt out of the system. You can conscientiously opt out of the matrix. But until you do, I recommend you constantly push to at least be aware and adapt to what's going on around you. That was my message to them. They have to change to survive. And to you, the small business person who might watch this later today or right now, you are avoiding the pain somehow. You are avoiding the pain. Similar to me having to look at my car and make my bed and sleep in it, because that's literally the metaphor we use is, hey, you made your bed, now lie in it. Basically, I made the situation I was in and I had to face it, and I had to go muck through the pain and dread of finding a job and humbling my ego and asking, and I ended up, the only job I could find was selling greeting cards for $7 an hour, and I was glad for it. I could buy gas. I could buy coffee. I could feed myself on bread. I could buy bagels with that. And I slowly built myself up to where I was the manager of a coffee shop in 6 months. And I was making great money then. If you do not face the very thing causing you pain, you will not survive. I'll read you this real quick and I'll let you get on with your day. This is what the 16th century samurai had to say about facing pain. They said this: it cannot be said that two men who face each other are cowards. It cannot be said if you go after and face your pain, admit what's going on. I realized recently that my expenses were exceeding my revenue by about $1,500 a pay cycle. That hurts because I realize I'm overstaffed, I have too much labor, and I have to make a painful change. We have the best staff we've ever had. But if I don't either dramatically increase sales or dramatically reduce labor, my business is going to get caught. Now, I could hide from that and just pretend everything's copacetic and do things the same way today on Monday as I did last Friday. But I can't. I have to iterate. And if I don't face that down, I am a coward. If I don't face that down, I'm hiding my head in the sand and I'm crossing my fingers and hoping it will get better. But guess what? Change is the only thing that's certain. So it's not just going to get better. It's just going to keep changing. So I have to change with it. The samurai said, two men who face each other, it cannot be said that two men who face each other are cowards. At minimum, by facing your pain, you at least build your self-image up and you say, I've got to face this. I've got to own my part of this, face up to it, and change my behavior immediately. Now, whether or not the opponent changes, whether or not it gets the effect I need, doesn't matter as much as me holding my head up high and changing with it, just like ChatGPT. So does a samurai know about ChatGPT? Not necessarily, but a samurai would know how to face it. Now, let me finish with this. The way of the samurai is this: morning after morning, the practice of viewing their death and pain, considering whether it will be here today or tomorrow, imagining the most sightly way, the boldest way to face their pain, the most sightly way of dying, and putting one's mind firmly in the face of death. What I mean is this, and what I think the samurai means is this. In a small business environment, you are generally always accustomed to a great degree of insecurity. As an entrepreneur, you're always going to face insecurity. Whether you're Alex Hormozy sitting on a couple $100 million in your fund, or whether you're the average dog walker who 5 years ago, word of mouth business was doing good enough for you. I've had several meetings with clients who are saying, Grant, help us with marketing. We have to change. And I'm advising them on that change because I'm not necessarily even advising them on how to market. My advice is how to change. I'm starting with this, how to change your paradigms, how to think about something new, how to open yourself up, how to let go of old ways. And the samurai's advice is salient because a lot of us won't change because we're afraid of facing the pain of possibly having to change your labor and let someone go. The change of having to change your routine and get out there and sell when you thought I just didn't have to sell anymore. I was dealing with word of mouth and I was getting by, and that's okay. The pain of having to ask someone for a loan to bridge yourself. The pain of looking at your debt increasing. A lot of you are avoiding looking at your bank accounts because you have a sinking feeling that those bank accounts are going negative, and they probably are if you're not looking at them. Chances are you are avoiding pain, and the samurai sage advice is look it dead in the eye. Either accept your death fate or look at it, realize it's not so bad, and take massive action. But if you don't look at it, you're a coward. And if you're a coward, it's not just about there's no social stigma in America about being a coward, not like in the East. But the indication of being a coward is that your world is imploding and you're not paying attention to it. That's the real implication. Not that you're going to get ostracized, not that anyone's going to shame you. But if you keep hiding and acting like a coward, your world will implode. The world gives resources to the bold, not the cowardly. And being bold isn't always being Elon Musk. Being bold is quite often looking at the pain in the face and saying, I'm going to do something about you today. And it might take me another day, another month, another year to dig out of this. But I'm going to face this. As the samurai says, morning after morning, practicing looking at death in the face, facing your pain, and putting into one's mind firmly that they will face it. Powerful words from a samurai. What are you avoiding? What pain is around you that you have been avoiding that you should be facing down, that you need to tackle? Maybe you're in a relationship you shouldn't be in, and the pain you're facing is the breakup. Maybe you're talking about breaking up, and the pain you're facing is having to change yourself. It's not prescriptive about what it is, but the principle stands. You and I have been avoiding different aspects of ourself, of our health and fitness, of our healthy, happy relationships, of work we love, and our spirituality. And it's only by facing them, staring them down, accepting that they are true and real, and that we have to do something to change this. Now, why am I sharing any of this with you? Shouldn't I be talking about technology? Shouldn't I be talking about crypto? Shouldn't I be talking about our investments? Shouldn't I be talking about our real estate? We save that for Friday Finances. We'll save that for Not Crypto Bros. But on Monday morning, it is my job to encourage you and to help you strengthen yourself so that your internal locus of control is powerful enough to accomplish the mission, which is igniting lives of explosive significance, starting with your own. Have a powerful